As Mark Twain observed, man is the only animal that blushes, or needs to. Humans do appear to be the only species that has eaten from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. We're the only animal that has acquired a moral sense. We're unique in judging behavior to be right or wrong. It would be absurd for me to get up here and talk about moral progress in rabbits or bears or even other primates. Morality is a human concept. Along with the moral sense, we seem to have acquired a greater capacity for altruistic behavior, and ironically, a capacity for sadism and cruelty that's uniquely human. So what is moral behavior? Many, many books have been written on that topic, and I don't intend to delve into it deeply today. My criteria for this talk are completely subjective. More of the I know it when I see it approach. And since it's my talk, you get my point of view. I do think that compassion is an important component of moral behavior. So if we want to evaluate our moral progress, where do we look? We cannot look at the best or the worst of human behavior. Every period of history, every generation, has a few people that are extremely good or extremely bad. We're all born with the potential to be Mother Teresa or Fred Rogers. And we were born with the potential to be Adolf Hitler or Joseph Stalin. Most of us don't go to either extreme. It's that great mass of humanity in the middle I want to look at, to try to find a consensus or at least a preponderance of opinion about what is moral and acceptable behavior. So let's look at some categories. War. War has always been horrible, and it still is. War has always been common and widespread, and it still is. We have no shortage of leaders who are willing and eager to start wars. And unfortunately, we seem to have no shortage of people who are willing to fight in them. War has always been devastating to civilians. Civilians suffer greatly in wars. That hasn't changed either. Every now and then, some governments will get together and sign agreements, treaties, protocols that seek to limit the horrors of war. Then a war gets started, and everybody promptly finds reasons that those agreements don't apply anymore, and they fall by the wayside. So this is one area where I see no progress at all. We're stuck right where we were centuries ago, only the technology has changed. So we get a failing grade on that one. Personal violence. And by that, I mean person-to-person violence as well as group violence like gangs or organized hate groups. This one's hard to judge. We live in a violent country. I certainly think in the United States, we're not making much progress on this. We have a great deal of violence, and I don't know, I can't really judge other countries very well on this, because certainly if you look at the media, the news media report plenty of violent activity all around the globe, but of course that makes news. I have the impression that some parts of the world may be a little less violent than us. Certainly other parts of the globe are more violent. So on this one, I don't think we're doing real well, but I find it hard to sort through what evidence there is. On the issue of crime and punishment, this is one where I think we're doing pretty well. Take capital punishment, for example. It used to be commonly accepted that capital punishment was the penalty for in some societies for a great many number of crimes. Now, a vast number of people think that it should be done away with entirely. In some countries, they've succeeded in doing that. In some others, like ours, the government lags behind the will of the people. But even though there are still people who believe capital punishment is appropriate at times, there is a huge change in the attitude toward it. Once upon a time, the whole point of capital punishment was to put people to death in as much torment as possible. I mean, consider crucifixion, burning. There's a long list of ingenious ways that people came up with to kill people painfully. And now, ever since the invention of the guillotine, we've been trying to find less horrible ways to kill people. If the irony isn't too much, I would say we have tried to find more humane ways to put people to death. And so that is an indication that we have brought an element of compassion to the whole concept. Torture used to be very common. And I'm not talking about torture to extract information from somebody. Torture as a routine punishment for crimes used to be commonplace. And there were plenty of creative people who could invent all kinds of ways to make people suffer intensely for long periods of time. And now, I think we have pretty much a consensus all around the world that torture is wrong. It's unacceptable. It's something to be done away with. That doesn't mean we've gotten rid of it. We still have enough sadistic individuals running around that are willing to torture people. But whenever it comes to light, whenever it's made known, it's condemned. People will not put up with it. Pretty much any kind of punishment that involves physical pain, maiming of the body. People used to be branded with hot irons for some crimes. Even something as apparently nonviolent as putting people in the stocks. That wasn't just humiliating. That was the mild form of torture. The body was forced into an unnatural position that was painful and forced to remain there for hours or days. So overall, our approach to punishments for crimes in most of the world has become tempered with a certain amount of compassion. Generally, we have failed to address the bigger question of whether punishment is even the best response to crime. So there's plenty of room there for greater progress. But overall, I think this one's a win. We've done pretty well. Slavery is another big win, I think. Used to be common in the ancient world, and right on up until recent history. It was taken for granted that slavery was an acceptable part of human social structure. Nowadays, I think we have a consensus that slavery is unacceptable and it has pretty much been done away with. I know there's some things going on in the world that could be considered slavery, but whenever they're brought to light, those things also are condemned by popular opinion. So we've done pretty well on that. The treatment of women. This one, we've got a big split, I think. In our part of the world, we've made great progress. At one time, not so long ago, a woman was completely under the control of her father until she married. Then she was completely under the control of her husband. She could be physically abused. She really had no rights. Didn't have the right to own property. A woman who was widowed didn't even have the right to be the legal guardian of her own children. I know there are still inequalities, there are still problems, but if you consider the amount of change over the past couple of centuries, I think we've made really great progress in that area. Unfortunately, there are other cultures in other parts of the world where women are still pretty much in the condition they were in 3 centuries ago. And we can hope that things will improve there. There's some really entrenched patriarchy in some cultures. And so depending on what part of the world you live in, this is good progress or hardly any. The treatment of children. Children used to have pretty much the status of slaves. They were the property of their parents, which meant basically of their fathers. And they could be exploited and abused pretty freely, as long as you didn't kill them. They could be put to work on the farm at a young age or in the family business. They could be rented out to neighbors. And, of course, with the Industrial Revolution, they could be sent off to the factories. And so, really not that long ago, children had hardly any rights and got hardly any consideration. And we've made great strides. In most of the world now, children are recognized as little human beings that have needs and have rights. So I know there is still child labor in the world, and I know that we often benefit from it. So that's something that we should keep our attention on and do what we can to improve the situation. Also in connection with children is the issue of corporal punishment. Corporal punishment used to be commonplace and not just in families. Teachers, school principals, children could be physically abused by a great number of people, and that was acceptable. And I know we still have a few holdouts that think that That's a good thing, but I think a large number of people have come to recognize that that is not the way to raise children. And so we've done pretty well there. The treatment of animals is a more complex issue. In the parts of the world where people are not too poor to have the resources to care for their pets, pets are doing pretty well. Our treatment of pets has made great advances over the past century or two. That's the bright spot. But then if we look at the conditions of farm animals, it used to be that animals raised on a family farm were pretty well treated. They were actually cared for by the farmers. They lived outdoors in fresh air and sunshine on green pastures and, generally had a pretty normal animal existence. And now animals that are raised for meat or egg production or milk, they are units of production. They are not even recognized as living creatures with needs, other than the barest physical needs to keep them functional. They are subjected to terrible conditions that are limited only by the fact that if the conditions were any worse, the profits would decline for the corporation that runs the farm. So farm animals are much worse off now than they were a century ago. And this is becoming more common all around the world, thanks to our multinational agribusiness corporations. Also, animals used for research. Animals in laboratories are subjected to horrible treatment. They are treated in ways that if someone treated their pet that way, they'd be hauled into court and probably sent to jail. If you treat the animals that way in a laboratory, you probably get more grant money and further your career. And I'm not talking about people curing cancer. Animals are used in the testing of cosmetics. They're used in so-called pure research for simply exploring some interesting academic question that has no foreseeable practical application to human welfare. As a going concern, I think humans have become very callous about the use of animals in research. And so overall, aside from the bright spot of how our pets are doing, our treatment of animals is probably worse than it has been many times in our history. On the issue of mental illness and disabilities, I think we've made some strides. I mean, it was once common that the mentally ill would be shut up in an institution somewhere and forgotten about. People with other disabilities would be left to fend for themselves and do the best they could, and frequently found no means of gainful employment and ended up as beggars or in the poorhouse. And so our attitudes have changed dramatically. We recognize that people with disabilities can be integrated into society and have a useful role in society and lead relatively normal lives, and that they are entitled to do that. So I think most of the world has come around on these issues, and so I think we've. We could still make improvements, but I think we've done pretty well. Bigotry of all sorts: race, ethnicity, religion, sexual orientation, etc., etc. Bigotry is alive and well and thriving all around the world, I'm sorry to say. It appeared, I don't know, maybe a couple of decades ago that things might have been improving. Apparently that was an illusion. Things just kind of went below the surface. I know that in this country the political climate is an issue, but it's not just here. European countries where bigotry has not been visible for a while, it's rearing up there also. The anti-refugee attitudes are mostly grounded in bigotry, and there are examples all around the world. Some of them so unlikely that they're shocking. In Myanmar, the Buddhist majority, we're talking about Buddhists now, drove out the Rohingya Muslims because of bigotry. There are, endless examples, and fortunately, there are some groups of people that reject bigotry and are, not going to put up with bigotry within their groups, and more power to them. I hope they can have an influence on others. But there are other groups of people where bigotry is embraced and applauded, and we got way too many of them. So, we humans have always had the tendency to fear and hate anyone who is different. I guess it's got a long history in human societies, and we still got it. It's still with us, unfortunately. And finally, I want to address selfishness and greed. Selfishness and greed have been motivating human behavior for about as long as humans have been humans. And I know we can find examples of selfishness in other species as well. So, unfortunately, it's deeply ingrained, and recently, I think capitalism has elevated selfishness to a virtue in many parts of the world. If you're selfish and good at it, then you get a lot of money, and you get a lot of status, and you get a lot of power. And then there are plenty of people in the world that have practically nothing, And it's kind of reasonable that they would be greedy to have more. But this is at the heart of so many of the problems facing humanity right now. It's at the heart of the environmental crisis. It's at the heart of the climate crisis. It is deeply involved in world hunger, often involved in wars. If there's any characteristic that's going to be the downfall of humanity, I think selfishness is it. Certainly, people will act compassionately rather than selfishly at times. Far too often, if there's a conflict between compassion and self-interest, self-interest wins. It's easy to be compassionate if you don't have to sacrifice anything for it. When you do, so many times we take the easy way out and do what's comfortable for us. If our moral sense is worth anything, I think this is where we should be applying it, to recognize that compassion is necessary if we're going to survive as a species. Sorry to end on a negative note, but those are my opinions, and I'll be happy to hear any of yours.